Legendaries, the perceptions of alt-friendliness. Know me. There's no end to complaints in the world, and the World of Warcraft too. Endless debates of opinion and ideology continue churning in chamber pots across the internet, and this is never gonna stop. The millions of players in WoW and the millions more who've stopped or are watching WoW from the sidelines, a pocket of them, the vocal player base as I call it, will find something to prop up as the latest icon of dissatisfaction in the game they otherwise enjoy talking about. But some of these once hot topics haven't quite held up over time. Hey, it's So, bringing to you the World of Warcraft. Today I'm going to bring up 6 complaints brought up going into Legion, and we'll see how they held up today now that we're about 5 months into the expansion. Before I start, here's the usual thing. This video is all opinion and conjecture based on limited research and personal observation. If you think I'm wrong about anything, feel free to disagree. Your opinions are just as valid if you get what I mean. Recently, the Balance of Power questline was completed by players thanks to the Nighthold raid opening up. The questline itself takes players through loads of PvE content and rewards a skin for our artifact weapons. This particular row of skins supposedly represents successful completion of organized group content, and by organized I mean not using a matchmaking system. In other words, the Balance of Power questline is not for players who exclusively use LFR or LFG systems. People bitched. This questline was the centerpiece of the latest round of arguments for and against LFR. All players should get access to this questline, some said. Some content should be exclusive to a certain playstyle like PvP, others say. Others say LFR isn't raiding, or presented old subscription data, or unreliable census data, and numerous alternative facts which I don't even know what has to do with the debate. But that conversation seems to have dulled out over the months. There are a number of reasons why this could be. One is that over time, players found that completing the questline was much longer than they thought, including waiting for the Nighthold raid to release, and the debate is just bound to reignite now that it can be completed. At the same time though, while waiting, we've been gearing to the teeth. How difficult is the normal version of Emerald Nightmare at this point? And by difficult, I'm not just talking about how hard we have to tank or heal or DPS, but the difficulties at forming a group quickly and more importantly at our own time. Outgearing content creates opportunities for like-minded players in a similar quandary to band together, join a stronger team's farm run, or just buy a run on the cheap. Players often will strive to overcome challenges to their normal behavior in the face of a reward, and that's kind of the point, isn't it? Regular raiders and keystone runners will probably complete this questline without a lot of additional work, but this questline is for players who have that same feeling as those back in the ancient days of WoW when they'd see a player wearing certain gear and go, ooh, how do I get that? Is the artifact power debate still a thing? The debate has changed a great deal recently. Early on, players felt ball and chained by the notion of having to basically gain additional experience after reaching max level. Even worse was the state of their poor alts who were doomed to always be 10% behind their mains. 715 sort of killed the argument though thanks to powerful catch-ups, and many reports are coming out from players reaching rank 54 on one or more weapons. And alts are now able to meet raid-ready requirements much more easily. Recent news on patch 7.2 has started to revive the argument, but in different ways, challenging players who have been hoping to surge ahead on the artifact power race. But is it still a thing? Or has it ever been a thing? The bleeding edge of raiding and now other PvE content has always involved pushing game systems to their limits, so for those few players, it'll always be something. But what about we who climb the mountain at our own pace, so to speak? Similar to player experience, we get artifact power whether or not we try. Thanks to 715, trying takes considerably less time and effort. There's a lot less to talk about. So how's that flight debate going? It's as strong as ever, it's just different now. Warlords of Draenor was a brutal debacle when it came to the flight debate, and it has less to do with the player philosophies of should we or shouldn't we be able to fly. Instead, Blizzard's mixed messaging and their own internal debates served to fire up the players more than it should have. Flight was wishy-washy. It was a debate where Blizzard found itself gridlocked. At first it appeared like Flight wouldn't return at all, another supposed broken promise from the company that's notorious for being accused that they make promises all the time. And then a compromise was reached in the form of the Pathfinder achievement, an experiment that will continue in Legion. The debate changed because we're simply back where we started with the philosophies of Flight. The difference now is that the uncertainty isn't here in Legion. There was a truckload of skepticism, but it wasn't justified with an outright disappointment. We knew Flight was coming as soon as we saw the initial Pathfinder achievement. The question left was how soon is soon? Now we know that too. The question now is if this approach is okay with Blizzard, or will we someday see a free-flying expansion like Cataclysm, or even a Flight-required expansion in the future? Fight on, forum people. Fight on. Account silence was a feature announced shortly before Legion, and it was designed to help protect players from the most egregious violations of spam, harassment, and unsavory language. As soon as it was announced though, an outcry erupted from players fearful of censorship and brigading in part of those same unsavory players, mostly due in part that the system was automated and not entirely managed with human input. Successful experiments were conducted proving the system could be abused. Not long after that though, word from Blizzard as well as the players promptly fell off. Was it because they were silenced? Probably not. The system is what it is, a system that responds to player reports of spam, language, harassment, and so on. It squelches the offender and allows an appeal process to contest the report. This system applies not to just WoW, but to Overwatch, StarCraft 2, and Heroes of the Storm. It's useless data, but in 2004, before any of these games were released, Battle.net had a concurrent user count of 400,000 players at one point. 12 years later, Activision Blizzard announced a monthly active user count of 42 million players. Somewhere in data points between that is the number of account silence reports that have to be handled each day, and I don't think that's something humans can handle proactively. Account silence for Wii players is passive. Proper operation of the system involves players doing no additional work to report. If it looks like it's working, great. If it doesn't look like it's working, it might just be because players don't care, and that's also the system at work. The nerf to the maximum distance our cameras could zoom out was another hot debate that suddenly went quiet. It started out clumsily enough that the camera zoom was scheduled to be nerfed early in Legion's development but was missed due to a bug, leaving players to be surprised at the sudden change. The response was dramatic on a scale similar to Blizzard's oversight. Players exaggerated over their sudden inability to raid at all due to the new view distance. Numerous reports of nausea and vertigo sprung up as well. It's hard to say how many of these reports were real, but it's important to note that this affected players who used a special console command to zoom out in the first place. A command that some would like to think every player does this, when this can't be proven one way or another. However, Blizzard does have access to this data. We tell them every time we log in. Blizzard eventually compromised with a less significant nerf to the maximum zoom, and a bit into Legion's launch activated the Action Cam feature, which for me allows a heck of a lot more comfort than the maximum zoom ever did. Is the Order Hall like our Garrison 2.0? No, but players were really scared of it. The Warlords of Draenor Garrison was the centerpiece of gameplay in that expansion. For a feature that offers no actual gameplay, it proved to be the thing to do in an expansion that for many players there weren't enough things to do. Naturally, as soon as the information was data mined from the alpha, irrational fears and symptoms of PTSD surfaced. It's another Garrison, they said. More of this Facebook Farmville click and drag bullshit, they said. Long live Master Plan, they said. The fear was that once again, the Order Hall/Garrison would be the place players would park their butts 26 hours a day because there'd be nothing to do outside of it. And boy, thankfully they were wrong. Except about one thing. The Garrison was many things, but the one thing it was not was a system whose interaction was required in order to be prepared for higher rank content. It did make oodles of gold, it gave easy materials, it gave gear, it facilitated our professions, but it was never required. The shipyard was though. It was needed to complete our Legendary Ring quest line, and for what little had to be actually done with the shipyard, going through the paces was required. We could argue all day as to whether or not the Legendary Ring was in fact required to raid at all, but I'm only making the point that the ring, which is a very potent source of power during the expansion, did require the use of the shipyard. So cut to now. Legion's Order Hall has two key components to mention, the third relic slot in our artifact weapon, and the Order Hall upgrade to allow players to use two legendary things. Are these required to raid or do keystones at all? Once again, no. But they are powerful upgrades that do require the use of the Order Hall, and just like the shipyard, once those requirements are met, the Order Hall is no longer a required thing to maintain. Players were fearful not of the simple non-gameplay elements that the Order Hall lifted from the Garrison, but that the world outside of the Order Hall would once again suck, leaving players stuck at a command table once again. Is the Order Hall Garrison 2.0? No, that's why people don't talk about it anymore. Is it Shipyard 2.0? Yes, but in the face of all that Legion has to offer, it's hardly a subject for debate once you finish the quest line and upgrades, and there are many things to do outside. We'll stop for now. Share your thoughts in this video, and stay breezy.